What if you could reach back in time and change just one thing about your past? Would you dare? What if it changed everything? No, I'm not talking about The Flash. I'm talking about Frequency from April of 2000, starring Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid. How have you not seen this movie? We've all done it. Wondered how our lives would be different if we'd have just done one thing instead of the other. Haven't we also wondered what we'd do if we could really go back in time and make a different decision or prevent a terrible thing from happening? It's why time travel stories grab us so easily and why they remain one of the favorite tropes of storytellers. One of the more unique versions of this was seen in 2000's Frequency, starring Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid. The story revolves around two men. Frank, a heroic New York City fireman in the fall of 1969, and John, a New York City homicide detective in the fall of 1999. In 69, Frank is the father of a 6-year-old boy that he dotes on and the loving husband of a wife he just can't get enough of. In 99, John is largely a broken man whose life at 36 was never the same after his firefighter dad died on the job, back in 1969. And as it happens, there's an unusual aurora borealis in the sky in both time periods, causing electrical issues in the area. I wonder if that'll factor into the story somehow.
No way!
Back in 69, where Frank and John are baseball fanatics, it's early October and the Miracle Mets are in the World Series. Frank's also an avid ham radio operator. In the backdrop, we learn that there's also a serial killer who has already killed 3 women running amok in the city, and the press has labeled the killings the Nightingale murders. You may want to keep that in mind for later. In 99, John still lives in the family home and has clearly never gotten over the loss of his father all those years ago. During a visit from a childhood friend and his son, they find John's dad's old ham radio and turn it on, but no one's there. Later that evening, when he's alone, a mysterious voice calls out through the radio and John answers. Turns out the voice in the radio is a man named Frank who also lives in Queens and loves the Mets. As you'd imagine, the two men talk at cross purposes, coming close to grasping what's happening but never quite figuring it out. Just as the radio cuts out, John mentions to Frank some specifics about how the Mets lose Game 1 of the series, which of course turns out to be exactly what happens when Frank watches the game. When they speak again the next night, Frank wants to know how he did it and is stunned when John tells him the series took place 30 years ago. John suddenly realizes that Frank is actually his dead father talking to him from the past, and he tries to convince him of that, because as it turns out, Frank is due to be killed in a fire the next day, and John sees this as an opportunity to fix the past. Frank still doesn't believe him, but as the radio cuts out, John implores him not to go with his instincts in the fire, and that had he just gone the other way, he'd have lived. When Frank sees Game 2 of the World Series play out the next day as John described, he remembers the warning in the fire and manages to escape with his life. But at what cost? How many lives did Frank's survival affect, and how will that butterfly effect reach out through time? And now that Frank survived the fire, they can't even fix what they've broken. I've given this much of the plot summary to get you interested, but I don't want to give away too much more. It's really that good. Time travel stories are a dime a dozen, but Frequency, written by Toby Emmerich, is a little bit different, and that difference is what makes it stand out. There's no actual time travel here. Instead, you've got two men speaking to each other through time. This adds a ton. Many of the ways you could have convinced a person you're from the future or past are made impossible by this aspect, and this helps build the tension and frustration. Think of it as the fuzzy sweater of storytelling. In addition, the fact that neither man knows exactly what's making the connection possible, and that if it's due to the aurora they're both experiencing, it could end at any moment, and that adds a ton of suspense. This is one that kept me guessing the whole way through the first time I saw it back then, and I'd be curious to know if you felt the same. The cast is outstanding here. You've obviously got Dennis Quaid, who is as Dennis Quaidy as you'd expect, and for this, that's perfect. His Frank is heroic, earnest, and you can really feel the love he has for his son, which ends up being the driving force for everything here. He's a great choice. Back in 2000, I could have seen Kevin Costner sliding into this role as well. The standout is Jim Caviezel as John. People tend to forget that before he played Jesus in Passion of the Christ, he was an up-and-coming young actor that had leading roles in The Thin Red Line opposite Sean Penn, Nick Nolte, and an all-star cast. In The Count of Monte Cristo opposite Guy Pearce and Henry Cavill. And in High Crimes opposite Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd. Since then, other than the CBS TV drama Person of Interest, which did run for 5 seasons, he's largely been outside of mainstream Hollywood. I'm not sure if that's a personal decision on his part given his religious beliefs or he's just been blackballed by the industry, but it's unfortunate because Caviezel was too talented to fall off the radar. Frequency is a great reminder of how talented the guy really is. Additionally, you've got a solid performance, as always, from Andre Braugher, and as well as appearances by Elizabeth Mitchell, Noah Emmerich, and Sean Doyle. You've even got a blink and you could miss him appearance by a 10-year-old Michael Cera.
Yikes.
So if you like time travel plots or are fans of Dennis Quaid or Jim Caviezel, you really need to do yourself a favor and track down 2000's Frequency. This is one I think has kind of been forgotten, and that's too bad because it's the exact kind of story we could all use right about now. Until next time, thanks for watching.